Welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief. I'm Adam Lucente. Today is Friday, March 13th, 2026. Thousands of Iranians have crossed into Turkey since the war in their country began. The US and Israel continue to launch heavy strikes across Iran, and the internet remains blocked. Local officials say more than 1,900 people have been killed. Turkey, of course, constitutes a safe haven for them, though the Turkish government said on Friday that a third missile fired from Iran at its territory had been shot down. Turkey has summoned the Iranian ambassador over the launches and recently deployed a Patriot air defense system, but has otherwise refrained from any major reactions. It's worth noting, of course, that Turkey hosts US troops and is part of NATO. In this episode, we'll be hearing from Al Monitor's Turkey correspondent, Ezgi Akin. Ezgi, who recently traveled to the border crossing in Kapaköy, takes us through the array of reasons Iranians are fleeing into Turkey, some of which are actually unrelated to the bombing. We'll also go over how Iranians and the Turkish government view the now paused plans for a US-backed offensive from Iranian Kurdish groups based in Iraq against the Islamic Republic, Turkey's response to the Iranian strikes targeting them, and how the war is impacting Turkey's economy. Hope you enjoy. Ezgi, welcome back to the Al Monitor Brief.
Thanks for having me, Adam. It's always a pleasure.
So yeah, thank you for your reporting down there from the southeast border with Iran. You went to Kapaköy. What were some of your observations from the border? Who did you speak to? What did you learn? I mean, take us through your impressions.
The crossing has been busier since the start of the war, of course. International observers that are monitoring the situation, as well as at the two other land crossings between Turkey and Iran. And one of the foreign observers described the situation as stable, meaning the flow of Iranians didn't reach anywhere close to any alarming levels. Some Iranians are coming to Turkey, some sort of seeking a respite and to celebrate Nowruz. It's a Persian and Kurdish New Year. It's celebrated on 21st of March in Turkey and 20th of March in Iran. Some are coming to use the internet for their work and to reach their relatives living outside of Iran, because, the communication blackout still affects many parts of Iran. And this is because many Iranians are also heading back to Iran. Since there is a communication blackout, Iranians are leaving Turkey and crossing to Iran to check on their loved ones, to be with them during the war. Now, Adam, let me explain where Kapaköy is a little bit. It's a border crossing in Turkey's southeastern Van province. And it has long served as a frequent vacation spot, particularly for secular Iranians. There are nightclubs there exclusively serving to Iranians, and locals call them actually Iran discos. So one has been attracting mostly secular Iranians, which may partly explain the main impression I got from my interviews with Iranians at the crossing. What's the main impression? The majority of Iranians remain haunted by the regime's crackdown on the protests last month more than the war itself, despite Iran being under heavy airstrikes for nearly 2 weeks. In fact, a man from Tehran summed up this sentiment in a strong quote, and I'm quoting him: "Look, we have been under attack by two powerful countries for 2 weeks, and they killed less people than mullahs did in 2 days." International civic groups, the protests in January, international civic groups put the death toll for the crackdown at least at 5,000. And let's remember what were the protests. The protests started in late December and morphed into nationwide demonstrations, one of the largest in the Islamic Republic's history. And it also saw one of the most brutal crackdown in the Islamic Republic's history. So the majority of Iranians I spoke to at Kapıköy remain haunted by the crackdown more than the war, I can say.
Ezgi, I also want to ask you about something that your report from the border touched on, which is this idea to have Iranian Kurdish groups based in Iraq do an offensive in northwest Iran. That operation seems to be on hold now. What did the Iranians crossing into Turkey think about this idea? And is Turkey relieved that this US-backed plan appears to have been set aside for now?
A very good question, Adam, and it's one of the most important issues that Ankara has been closely watching. I mean, it's one of the most important aspects of the Iran war for Turkey. Let me start with the Turkey front on this. First of all, both Erdogan and Fidan issued tough warnings against such plans, and we can assume that Ankara is closely watching the trajectory if the plan really shelved or not shelved. But Adam, in fact, Barın Kayaoğlu also wrote an article on this last week. If readers want to check, in fact, Ankara currently remains unfazed by such reported plans because many in here simply don't see such plans as feasible, as they risk turning Iran into another forever war. Arming Kurdish groups to fight against the regime risks plunging Iran into a civil war, many say. Many Iranians also told me this at the Kapıköy border crossing. And it's one of the few points that, interviewees from different backgrounds had a consensus on, because Iranian nationalism is one of the strongest sentiments in Iran. Many Iranians who say they are, for example, glad that Khamenei was killed, even they are against such plans, fearing that it could fuel Kurdish separatism in Iran. The Kurdish issue is particularly sensitive in Iran's northwest, where ethnic Azerbaijanis and ethnic Kurds live side by side. And there we see occasional ethnic tensions emerging between the two communities, because there is a suspicion among the ethnic Azerbaijani communities of Iran that some Iranians might be seeking an autonomy or federal arrangements within Iran.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be back with Ezgi Akin after this short break.
Today's transformation of the Middle East is at the center of global geopolitics. Whether you're an analyst, diplomat, executive, or academic, you need the best reporting and analysis to understand what's really happening on the ground and what it means for the world. Al Monitor is the award-winning independent leader in Middle East news. From Riyadh to Beirut, Abu Dhabi to Doha, and Baghdad to Tehran, our team of over 100 expert journalists report daily on the top stories driving the regional trends. Download our mobile app and subscribe to Al Monitor to follow what leaders and decision makers are reading every day. Go to almonitor.com, that's AL-MONITOR.com, and use promo code POD25, POD25 for a discount.
Ezgi, shifting to the bigger picture with Turkey. The last time we spoke on this podcast, Turkey had not been targeted in this war. Now today, there was the third interception of a projectile from Iran to Turkey. How does Turkey view Iran targeting them in the war now that that's happened? And in your view, are they content to remain defensive, or is a military action possible?
Great question, Adam. First of all, let me say Turkey is very concerned over what has been unfolding. And as you said, just today, Friday, a third ballistic missile from Iran was intercepted by NATO defense system. So Ankara has been ramping up its rhetoric against Iran. It formally protested Tehran after the first and second missiles that were intercepted also by NATO forces. But honestly, I don't expect a change in Turkey's balancing act between Tehran and the United States, because in Turkey's view, the risks of war outweigh Turkey's concerns over Iran's aggression. And the top of them is a potential refugee influx from Iran. The country already hosts more than 2 million refugees from Syria and other conflict zones, and anti-refugee sentiment already runs high in the country. And there are, of course, risks related to the Turkish economy, with oil prices, are going up.
Yeah, and on that note with the oil, like you mentioned, I mean, I just checked, it was like $98 a barrel Brent crude. It's been around 100 for a few days. With the unrest in Hormuz, I mean, how is that specifically affecting the Turkish economy?
Well, we saw the first impact on this Thursday, actually. Turkey's central bank paused its monetary easing policies it had been following for some months now. And instead of further cutting interest rates further, the bank held the rate the same. Now, purchasing power in Turkey is already low, with annual inflation still above 30%. Oil price hikes will further increase inflation, with a direct impact on people's lives, particularly on food prices, because while the annual inflation in Turkey has been declining for some time now, Turkey's food inflation remains very sticky. And with increasing in transportation prices, fertilizer prices, and other costs, it will be much more too difficult to tame the food inflation and overall annual inflation numbers.
Ezgi, thanks a lot for your time and your reporting from the border, and we look forward to more of your articles and videos.
Thank you so very much, Adam.
Thanks for listening to the Al Monitor Brief. Be sure to follow Al Monitor for more on the stories impacting the Middle East. Until next time, I'm Adam Lucente.